The creature in the attic. The Thompson family had just moved into their new home, a large old house on the outskirts of town. The house had a charm to it, its wooden beams, the ivy creeping up the walls, and the wide windows that allowed the sunlight to flood every room. It seemed like the perfect place to start a new chapter of their lives. But as soon as they arrived, there was something off about it. When they first entered, they noticed the musty smell that seemed to linger in the air, as if the house had been abandoned for years. The floors creaked underfoot, and the walls were covered in layers of dust. It felt as if the house had been waiting for someone to come and breathe life into it again. The family consisted of Mark, a hard-working father, his wife Claire, a caring and practical woman, and their two children, Emily, a curious 12-year-old, and 9-year-old Lucas, who was quiet and reserved. They were eager to settle in, but little did they know that their excitement would soon turn into dread. On their first night in the house, after unpacking most of their belongings, Claire made dinner in the spacious kitchen while Mark explored the upstairs rooms. The children, always full of energy, ran around playing hide-and-seek, their laughter echoing through the house. But as the evening wore on, a strange sound began to emerge, faint but distinct, a soft scratching noise, like something small clawing against the wooden floor above them. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked, stopping in her tracks. Claire paused, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's probably just the house settling," she said, trying to dismiss the feeling that something was amiss. But as the night wore on, the noise became harder to ignore. It wasn't just random creaks, it was deliberate, like something, or someone, was moving in the attic. Claire asked Mark about it later, but he shrugged. "Maybe a squirrel or a raccoon got in through the roof. I'll check it out tomorrow." That night, they all tried to ignore the unsettling noises, but it was difficult. As they lay in their beds, Emily could hear the sound again, a slow, dragging scrape, as if claws were dragging across the wood. She pulled the blanket tightly over her head, trying to convince herself it was nothing. The next morning, Mark went into the attic, his flashlight in hand. The wooden staircase creaked under his weight as he ascended, the air growing colder with every step. He reached the top, his heart pounding in his chest. The attic was dimly lit, filled with old boxes, dusty furniture, and forgotten trinkets. At first glance, there was nothing unusual. Mark moved cautiously through the attic, inspecting every corner. He checked the old windows, the wooden beams, the chimney. Nothing seemed out of place. The sound had stopped, and for a moment he convinced himself it had been nothing more than an animal. But as he was about to leave, he noticed something strange. A large old trunk hidden in the far corner. It was covered in a thick layer of dust, but the edges of the trunk were marked with scratches, as if something or someone had tried to claw their way out. His curiosity got the better of him. He walked over and ran his hand over the trunk. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up as a cold chill crept down his spine. Mark hesitated for a moment, then opened the trunk. Inside, there was nothing but darkness, but as soon as he opened the lid, the scratching sound began again, louder this time. It was coming from within the trunk. Mark slammed the lid shut and backed away, his heart racing. He couldn't explain it, but he knew there was something in the attic that shouldn't be there. That evening, as they sat down for dinner, Mark didn't mention the incident to Claire or the kids. But Emily had noticed how pale her father looked. She kept glancing at him, sensing that something was wrong. Later that night, after the family had gone to bed, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. She lay still in the darkness, listening to the soft creaking of the house. Then, just like before, the scratching sound started again, this time louder and closer. It came from directly above her. Her heart pounded in her chest as she turned her head toward the ceiling. The sound continued, but it wasn't just scratching anymore. It was a rhythmic thumping, like something heavy was moving around in the attic. Terrified, Emily got out of bed and tiptoed across the hallway to her brother Lucas's room. She knocked quietly on his door. "Lucas, wake up," she whispered urgently. "Do you hear that?" Lucas, half asleep, nodded. "Yeah, I thought it was just the house settling, but it's really loud tonight." Emily's eyes were wide with fear. "It's not the house. Something is up there." They both stayed awake, listening to the noises above them, but this time they weren't just sounds of scraping. Emily could hear something else, muffled breathing, slow and steady,